1 second. Let's get going. Once more, welcome to LuraTech's webinar, directly integrating the PDF compressor into workflows or ECM systems using our new API. Armin, can you give us first slide, please? Thanks. So yeah, to start with, we called it an API, and I tried to position this a little bit on what it is and what it is not. This API is not a new product or a new SDK in itself. It is a feature, I think an important and a very, very, let's say, promising feature for PDF Compressor, but after all, it's a feature of PDF Compressor Enterprise version. The API, and we didn't call it SDK to really differentiate it from our SDK products, but the API to the PDF Compressor is more comparable to other interfaces that we gave the PDF Compressor already. Interfaces that help to control and manage PDF Compressor from other parts of the workflow, let's say from a workflow software, from the step before the PDF Compressor in the workflow and everything else. So for those of you who are familiar with it, it's more comparable to job list processing than anything else. But in this case, the API, as the name suggests, is a programmatic interface. So you can really use your calling application and have really a functional call, a procedure to call, and then have a synchronous option to control the PDF Compressor service and use it for all the document conversion with all the functionalities of the PDF Compressor as it has it. Synchronous wasn't possible before. With job list processing, as we had it so far as an integration interface, you dropped an ASCII file, which is good news. An ASCII file is good. You can create it from Linux or Windows or everywhere. You drop an ASCII even from a scan software. You create an ASCII file, drop it into a specific place, but then what? PDF Compressor would take up or pick up that job list processing file as a job ticket, let's say, at one point, start working on it, and will be ready at another point, and you would have to pull or try to look for ready files and go files and probably tell from entries in the PDF Compressor log file about what's the health or the status of the PDF Compressor. Is it just taking very long because it's very busy, or the document is very long, or is it probably not there as a service or something like that? So that wasn't possible with the asynchronous interface as we had it so far, based on those job lists processing. Now with the API, we have an option to synchronously start, see the progress and everything and all the status, and then also get the finish information synchronously from the PDF Compressor in your calling applications. So this API comes in variations, let's say. Those variations are a classic C function export DLL interface as you know it. And this is the one thing you can use for your integration, and the other interface is a .NET interface where you can also then call the same functionality and everything else through, let's say, C# or .NET applications, whatever. It's not a web service, which is something that people might ask for, but it is definitely a good basis to create a web service. So when you have your PDF Compressor running somewhere in your system or somewhere in your infrastructure and want to have it a web service, the API is the way to go through in order to create your web service for it. Another thing I want to inform you about is, I think, good news for everybody out of there. It's part of every license. So the API is not an additional cost. It is not an additional separate option that you would need to purchase or buy. If you already have, and most of you today probably have, a license of PDF Compressor, just update to the latest version, and then you also have access of the API in both the .NET and the CDLL interface variations or variants. For availability, it's available today. It's available since a couple of days. If you upgrade to the latest version of PDF Compressor, which is 7.2 something, you'll just have it. And how it looks and everything else, we'll definitely see practically shown and introduced by Armin later on. Allow me one more slide, and Armin, show it, please. Because I want to also tell you a little bit about what our thoughts were when we started to create this interface. So this interface has certain user groups, I think. And one user group is definitely those companies who actually create software. That might be ISVs, might be OEMs using our technology inside their bigger offering, like an ECM system or something like that, or a capture workflow or something. But it might definitely also be system integrators who actually were the first ones to start asking us for having a programmatic interface towards the PDF compressor. It allows close and direct integration of PDF compressor services into your environments, into your software as a system integrator, as an ISV, as an OEM. And once more, the difference for you as a software vendor towards using, or the difference towards using the LuraTech PDF SDK, as most of you also might know as a product, is the PDF SDK, also available in .NET and CDLL interface, is an MRC compression SDK. The PDF compressor today does a whole lot more than that. It also uses MRC compression SDK, the LuraTech PDF SDK, as a basis, but that's just one base component, and the PDF compressor does way more. I'm thinking about things like converting emails to PDF, converting Office files to PDF and all other born digital formats into PDF or PDFA. The PDF compressor services allow to do full text searchable documents with OCR and everything else, all not available in the basic MRC compression SDK, in the LuraTech PDF SDK. So the API offers a whole lot of new services and options that you can integrate into your applications. For the resellers who are here, they know it. They probably also have a contract about it. We offer reseller conditions. We offer OEM agreements. Just get in contact with us, let's say, and we can talk about that. The second big group of target audience, let's say, for the API functionality feature of the PDF Compressor Enterprise is users with own infrastructure. We have a variety of users out there and who have strong own IT departments, who have private workflows created, private software components created, who have their systems, environments, and tools already set up, and also want to profit from a direct integration of PDF Compressor into their private environments there. And of course, the API is helpful for those, we call them end customers, I'm sorry for that, for those direct users of PDF Compressor Enterprise as well. We offer different technical interfaces just to allow you to integrate it into a variety of different scenarios, whatever kind of OS, whatever kind of programming language, whatever kind of calling applications and workflow solutions you have there, you should be able to get it integrated in there using the new feature, the PDF Compressor Enterprise's API. Now, I promised not so many slides, so I mean, when you're ready, you could probably take over and introduce a little bit what the architecture is, and of course, show it.
Yes, sure, of course. Okay, so to outline the architectural structure a little more, I've created this slide here, which is at this point kind of empty, but what you see is a server instance, meaning a Windows server machine, either a real physical machine or a virtual machine with a PDF compressor installed, and these 4 C's serve to symbolize 4 processor cores. So this is quite a normal PDF compressor installation, and what we now have in addition to that is the API, which is an external component. Think of it as a DLL, as a dynamic link library, or a .NET assembly. There are 2 versions of it, and I'll get to that in a minute. which is integrated in your client application, but under the hood it can communicate with the PDF compressor running on the same server, and these bidirectional arrows show that you can submit a job, you can receive status information, you can abort or query the state of your job, and you'll synchronously get a result once the conversion has finished. So once it's finished, it's either been successful or there have been errors, and you'll be notified. Now, Carsten already mentioned the Synchronous API. This calling convention can also be chosen to be asynchronous. So if you are fond of this fire and forget tactics that the current job list or the previous interface, the job list processing interface, which is of course still supported, that this offered, you can handle this in quite the same fashion. So if you say, well, I don't know how to handle the errors anyway, I'll just want to submit jobs and continue with my own business, and maybe somebody will check the error folder by the end of the day, that's fine with me. Then you can also just call this or use this interface in an asynchronous fashion. You'll submit a job, you'll not be notified of anything, but you can just continue with your own work, or maybe in your own time you can query the job status, but of course the status will not be cached forever. So once it's gone, after a while your status request will no longer yield any real results. This here is to symbolize a standard command line tool. I'll show an example of that soon. This is actually pre-packaged along with a PDF compressor installation. So an example command line client using the API to submit jobs to the PDF compressor is shipped both in binary form and in source code, along with a Visual Studio sample project that serves to immediately build and maybe modify and adapt this little example to your own needs. Second version, which we'll also demonstrate soon, is, for example, an ASP.NET website. So if you use the .NET version of the API, of course, it's straightforward to incorporate it with the code behind of an ASP.NET website, and soon enough you're ready, for example, to have a site that allows for interactive upload of source file, of input files for PDF compressor, converting them online, and getting the converted results back via a web download. I'll demonstrate that as well. This really has prototypical character, so it will not directly ship it with the PDF compressor, but I think for everyone familiar with ASP.NET, using the interface in this context is quite straightforward. And of course, as a third option, you don't need to create any interactive or user-driven tools. You can, of course, use the API to address PDF compressor from some other rather service-like systems. I have just named this here DMS and fitted it with the good old database barrel and some documents. So if you have a document management system that in the context of some workflows requires conversion via PDF compressor, of course, you can link that to PDF compressor using the API, and in this fashion directly incorporate PDF compression and conversion capabilities into your document management systems and the associated workflows. Concerning the demos, we have 4 examples prepared, which I'm going to show. The one is the command line tool. That's one of the 2 that are shipped with PDF compressor, and as Carsten repeatedly mentioned, this comes for every customer and even with the demo version of PDF compressor, so it's free and requires no additional permit, licensing, token, whatever. The second one is a little application with a graphical user interface written in good old WinForms.NET, and of course under the hood using the .NET API DLL. Both as ready-to-use binaries or as ready to inspect and modify source code with their associated Visual Studio sample projects. Two more things only here in the webinar. One is, oh, here's a typo. One is an ASP.NET, well, plainly speaking, website that addresses the PDF compressor via the interface. The other one is a menu item for SharePoint documents, and this is the slightly embarrassing point. The SharePoint server somehow crashed on me in the last few minutes before the webinar, so I'll be unable to show this really live. I'll be able to show you conceptually what can be done, and please bear with me since this is not a real live working example, although we tried for quite some time to make it work reliably. Anyway, let's just get to the demo. So, first of all, this is PDF compressor. As you may know it, the main window looks pretty much like the previous version, except for this little button, which also sits on the menu here. And there, you no longer can only start the job list processing, which I'll not get into detail here about, but you can start API mode processing. So the first thing to note is the API requires a specific mode that you put PDF compressor into, and it's mutually exclusive with the standard job-driven processing via the user interface or via hot folders or whatever. We created it in this fashion as to make sure that the API calls do not interfere with any user-driven actions. For example, as you'll soon see, the progress is still monitored here in a read-only fashion in the user interface, and in order to avoid confusion, keep people from interactively stopping jobs that were submitted via the API and vice versa, we chose to make it two separate nodes. We don't think that this really limits the use cases. Anyway, starting the API mode gives you a quick warning, and then the background here turns blue, and quite a few menu items are disabled. And now PDF compressor is ready to accept jobs submitted via the API. Next thing here, this is my installation folder for PDF compressor, and you'll see this new subfolder here, which is called API. And as promised, it not only includes the DLL versions for both .NET, and here are the 32-bit, 64-bit native DLLs, but also these two readily compiled sample applications, plus some documentation here, plus the source code for the two applications here in this subdirectory. Anyway, let's start with the command line client. This is really down-to-earth, good old-fashioned command line tool. I'm not good enough at typing to really put together a long, lengthy command line here live in the webinar, but just calling it without any options given gives you the usage message, and what you see here is setter options for the most common options, such as the input and output locations, the option to override output, and so on and so forth. This maps to the options of PDF compressor as you know them and as you see them in the job list DAT files in a pretty straightforward fashion. And actually, we try not to reinvent the wheel here. If you do have DAT files for your common jobs already, well, then you can just load them here in this command line client. You don't have to pick up all or pick out all the individual values, translate them to a command line just to receive the same result. And this this cascade of options applies to the API throughout. So first of all, you have factory defaults for certain things, where at least an input location, of course, needs to be set. We can't have that as a factory option, but you can then replace or at least supplement these factory defaults by loading a DAT file, and still on top of that, you can modify individual values via setters. Here, these are command line options. In other cases, they are, of course, setter or getter C functions or .NET properties. Anyway, let's get to an example that will actually do something. That's this one here. This is the WinForms.NET version of an API client, and we try not to recreate the entire PDF compressor interface here, but we do have a few options, and if I'll just file here to convert this hotel invoice, for example, that's all that's required. I tell it to run, and soon enough you see this job appearing here in PDF Compressor. Well, that was quick. What you also see is the log messages of this conversion being created as they are actually delivered back to the calling client via API callbacks. Okay, so here you do have this PDF. We can quickly check it. Well, there it is. PDF A2U, standard option, and of course it's LuraTech PDF Compressor, and the date shows it's fresh. Again, this one's also packaged with PDF Compressor. It's being installed automatically. It shouldn't get in your way if you don't require it and if you're not interested. But if you're interested, the API subfolder contains all you need to get you going. If any questions are left unanswered, of course, feel free to ask our support team, which will probably provide the additional information. Concerning the ASP.NET website, I've really just taken the most straightforward ASP.NET sample project and dropped in the required lines of code to make it call the API. Well, maybe let's have a look at the web page first. Please bear with me if some of the stuff is in German. I tried to switch everything to English, but maybe even trying to select English was the thing that confused the SharePoint server. I'm not quite sure. Well, as you see, plain and simple ASP.NET site. One button for browsing a file. The next thing to convert the file. The log messages will be shown here, albeit in a less formatted fashion than in the WinForms client, and eventually we can download the PDF generator. And let's just, for example, well, let's pick this one. So you'll see a few log messages appearing. Some of them are shown repeatedly, as they are not being filtered here. So if OCR being done is reported 5 times or 6 times, we'll see it here. Eventually, this none is the eventual step. It's done, and I can hammer on this download button, and I'll actually see the invoice for our selters here in PDF compressor fashion. And again, this is some 100 lines of code, and anyone familiar with .NET and especially ASP.NET should be able to perform the few calls required. We'll initialize the library here. Once the page has loaded, we'll have a handler for the convert button. We'll have a callback that's filling up the status buffer, and we do have the actual conversion where a few standard properties are set, and then finally the job is run in the background to keep the website responsive. And again, the download button is really straightforward ASP.NET, and altogether it's some 120 lines of code. And of course, if you're really interested, this doesn't really have product quality, but we're of course we are happy to discuss this with you and to provide a few more hints if you want to implement something like that. Now for the dysfunctional SharePoint example, that was meant to look like this. We do have a SharePoint server here. Again, sorry for that, with a lot of German entries, but maybe it still looks familiar. You do have a list of documents. You have this context menu for the documents. And here in this edit control block, as it is called, we have an extra menu item, which again was meant to trigger a conversion remotely using PDF Compressor, and then the result would be pushed back onto the SharePoint server, where it would either be sorted among these documents as an alternative version, or it would automatically be provided for download. And we are aware that this is a bit of reinventing the wheel, because of course there are SharePoint plugins that help you to convert a TIFF or a Word document to PDF. But on the other hand, if you like our means and our way of compression, and if you trust us to create proper PDFA, and you do have a PDF compressor license with its OCR engine anyway, it might still be feasible and a viable option to use it in this fashion. And again, the code is quite concise here for this SharePoint integration. This is actually the controller file, and again, not that big. It's a handful of lines of code that do the actual work, and all the rest is authorization and streaming files back and forth. Yeah, again, sorry that we didn't manage to get this to work. We were quite proud of it yesterday, but again, today it's in some kind of undefined state, and we'll have to work on it some more. Carsten, do you see any questions so far?
Yeah, we got a couple. Just want to really wrap this up a little bit. Probably you return to the slides, and I think we just have the last slide here with some contact information for you to probably get back to us if you are interested in anything or learning more. Trying to wrap it up, SharePoint running or not is not really a big issue, I think, because what we wanted to transport is that, or the message here is, with the PDF Compressor API, you're now in the position to use a couple of hundred lines of code as we saw it, and use the PDF compressor directly from your infrastructure, from your software. And it might be a SharePoint server, but we didn't bring up a SharePoint product, not that we are mistaken here. What we wanted to display is that any document management system, any ECM system out there, any capture workflow tool, let's say, or recognition software, or whatever, can now directly be connected with PDF Compressor. This SharePoint example just as one example out of many. Same thing for the small Windows application that you saw there. So why on earth did they create another GUI for the PDF Compressor? This is just an example. You could have something like a scan software, a Windows client software, whatever it is. And this Windows client software can now directly interface with PDF Compressor Enterprise and use it as if it were a component of your own software, directly integrated. And the command line tool is just the same thing. It's another calling application, though we had customers out there who said, an easy integration scenario would be for us to have a command line option, which is there now as an extra layer, say, one above the SDKs or the PDF Compressor API in itself. So everything else today really just for demo purposes, for you to understand what you could do, what options we have introduced now with the new feature PDF Compressor Enterprise API. And then, of course, there are some questions, and one question is again directly addressing the architecture, because the question is, when PDF Compressor runs in API mode, can it still be run as a Windows service? And I know the answer, but probably you want to answer that, Amin.
Well, it does run as a Windows service anyway, and all the time. The actual core conversion engine of a PDF compressor is a Windows service. I can even quickly demonstrate that. Here, it's always to be found in the Services Manager.
Probably your window is frozen there. I still see the context.
Okay.
Oh yeah,
already have it open. So this is the Service Manager, again with the German user interface. And here, LuraTech PDF Compressor Enterprise is a background service starting automatically. And it runs like that anyway. So the answer is yes. Again, what you have to keep in mind that the standard operations mode of operations is separate from the job list mode, which is again separate from the automatic API mode. So these three are three distinct modes of operation for the PDF compressor, and any installation can be put in either of the three modes, but only in one at a given time.
Yeah. But all these three modes have the same thing. They are based on the PDF compressor, which is a Windows service, basically. Mm-hmm. What you see there as a GUI is really just a configuration GUI. The PDF compressor is still running if you close the GUI, because what it really uses to do the job is actually a Windows service in itself and nothing else. So in API mode, for sure, it runs as a Windows service, no problem.
And actually, maybe to answer the second aspect that comes up with this question, which I tried to outline using this DMS block in the slides. Of course, you can set it up in a way that another service acts as a client via the API to the PDF compressor, and these two background services communicate along happily together without any user interaction. So the API in itself is totally agnostic of whether you create a manually interactive application or another service. Actually, the ASP.NET example internally issues the call via an IIS web service. So although you see a website displayed in the browser, the actual call is routed through a service already.
Yeah, exactly. So the integration can be without any GUI and any interface, like with a normal SDK. Just really our API here is completely relying on the Windows service being installed there. There is one other question, which is probably quickly to be answered by me. There's a question whether PDF validation functionality is available through the API, and the answer is unfortunately no, because validation is not part of the functionality of PDF compressor. The PDF compressor does document creation from scanned formats into high compressed PDFs and PDFAs. It does document conversion from Office, PDF of sorts, emails into PDF or PDFA. It does run OCR. It does a whole lot more in terms of structuring the output and structuring the documents and creating feature-rich PDF files. But what it does not is validation. So it's not part of the PDF compressor. Thus, it is, and the API really opens up access, and by the way, to all of the features of PDF compressor. Unfortunately, validation is not a feature of PDF compressor. There's one last question, and that's also sort of a question that I could also answer, and that's about how can we test that? How can we try? That is pretty easy, because as I said before, and also Armin mentioned it, this is the feature of the latest version 7.2 of PDF compressor. So when you have a license, or if you're interested in a demo version, contact us. If you have a license, you probably get an update of your license through support@luratech.com, and you know how to do that. Just get the latest version and you can try the API, and it does come with documentation, as you saw. It does come with sample code, and it should be possible for you to take a look at that. If you're not yet a customer and you want to still try it, contact maybe me. My email address is on the screen here. My phone number is on the screen there. Just drop me a line or something, and I'll get you access to a demo version. The demo versions are not feature limited. They are just creating a LuraTech logo in every output PDF file. Other than that, it's full functional, including the API, so you can just try it. Availability is already now. If you're interested, drop me a line. I'll get you access and all the additional information that you probably need or want. So that's about it for today. I hope we found the balance between a programmer kind of webinar talking about an API and not boring the others who are probably not that familiar with programming, as well as we got enough insight for the real programmers here in the webinar here and not making it boring and too high level. So whenever there are questions left, again, use the contact information on the screen. We're happy to talk. We're happy to share information. We're happy to share a demo version. And hope you liked the webinar. And I hope for sure to see you the next time in one of our webinars, which will be in the next 2 to 4 weeks again and ongoing. Thank you very much for your attention today, and have a good day, everybody.
Well, thank you, and goodbye.